My daughter's name is Emily. My son-in-law, Mark. And on a crisp autumn afternoon, high above the winding trails of the Great Smoky Mountains, they tried to murder my wife and me. No, tried isn't right. They did murder my wife, and they certainly thought they'd murdered me. But I'm here, and I'm going to tell you exactly how it happened, and why the most horrifying truth wasn't the fall, but what my wife whispered just before she died. It was supposed to be a tradition. Our annual hike up the Cataloochee Divide, just outside Waynesville. Sarah, my beautiful, vibrant Sarah, always loved the way the ancient forest smelled after the morning dew had evaporated, leaving behind that rich, earthy scent of pine and damp soil. We'd done it for 30 years, just the two of us. Then with Emily when she was a little girl, her tiny hand clutched in mine, her laughter echoing between the ancient trees. This year, though, it was a quartet. Emily, now 32, and her husband, Mark Thornton. He was a smooth-talking, sharp-suited Wall Street hotshot, or at least that's how he liked to introduce himself at family dinners. Me? I'm John Harrison, or at least that's the name I've used for the last 25 years since I retired from, well, let's just say from a profession that teaches you a thing or two about observation and survival. The air was sharp, biting with the promise of winter, but the sun, low in the sky, painted the peaks in hues of amber and gold. Picture postcard stuff, perfect for a family outing. We'd reached one of our favorite overlooks, a sheer granite outcropping that dropped a good 200 feet down to a jagged creek bed. Below, the trees looked like miniature broccoli, and the creek was a silver thread. Sarah, her silver hair catching the light, was laughing, leaning against me as I pointed out some rare hawk circling far below. Emily was snapping photos on her phone, Mark leaning possessively over her shoulder, a forced smile plastered on his face. I should have seen it. Maybe I did, deep down, but chose to ignore it. A faint unease, like static electricity in the air before a storm. Mark's smile never quite reached his eyes. Emily's laughter seemed a little too bright, a touch too brittle. They'd been acting off for weeks. Distant calls, hurried whispers. I chalked it up to marital stress, or maybe Mark's perpetually demanding job in New York. We were simple folk, rooted in this quiet corner of North Carolina. Their world of high finance and Manhattan apartments always felt a million miles away. Sarah turned to me, her eyes sparkling with that familiar joy I'd known for 4 decades. "Isn't it breathtaking, John?" she whispered, squeezing my hand. Like God's own painting. And that's when it happened. One moment, I was absorbing her warmth, the next, a sudden, violent shove. Not a stumble. A deliberate, powerful push from behind. 2 pairs of hands. Emily. Mark. The realization hit me a split second before gravity took over. It wasn't an accident. It was them. Time warped. The world spun. Sarah's startled gasp. My own grunt of shock. The sickening lurch in my stomach as the ground vanished beneath my feet. I remember seeing Emily's face for a fleeting second as we went over the edge. Her eyes, cold and utterly devoid of the warmth I'd known since she was born. Mark's expression was a mix of terror and grim determination. They wanted us dead. They wanted us gone. The fall was brutal. I twisted in the air, trying to shield Sarah, my body instinctively contorting, a lifetime of training kicking in even as my mind screamed in disbelief. We hit the first outcropping with a jarring impact that sent a jolt of pure agony through my left leg and shoulder. Then another tumble, another crash against unforgiving rock and brittle branches. I felt the sharp bite of stone, the tearing of fabric, the warm gush of blood. My head slammed hard. Darkness threatened to consume me. I lay there, crumpled and broken, a mangled heap of flesh and bone and ruined dreams. The air was knocked clean out of my lungs, and every breath was a painful wheeze. My vision swam, speckled with black dots. I could hear Sarah nearby, a soft, broken groan escaping her lips. My mind, despite the pain, was racing. Why? Why would they do this? My own daughter? Then, like a wisp of smoke, a sound reached me. Sarah's voice, barely a whisper, strained and hoarse, but clear enough to cut through the ringing in my ears. "Don't move, John, play dead. Play dead." The words sank in, chilling me more than the cold mountain air. She knew. She understood, in her dying moments, what I hadn't even fully processed. That they were still there. That they were watching. And then I heard them. Footsteps above. Slow, deliberate. They were coming to check. I forced myself to lie absolutely still, every muscle screaming in protest. The pain was a living thing, gnawing at me, but I clamped down on it, just like I've been trained to do in countless hellholes across the globe. Breathe shallow. Control your heartbeat. Look inanimate. Be nothing. Their voices drifted down to me, muffled by the distance and the wind, but clear enough to shatter what little humanity I still clung to for Emily. Are they gone? That was Mark, his voice a little shaky, a note of triumph barely masked by a false tremor. They went over. No way they survived that, Emily replied, her tone flat, devoid of emotion. My Emily, the girl I'd taught to ride a bike, who'd snuggled against me for bedtime stories. Look at the height, Mark. It's done. A rustle of clothing. I imagine them peering down, their faces cold, detached. Monsters. Good. Mark breathed a sigh of relief. Finally, the last obstacle. The last obstacle. That's what we were. Sarah and me. Obstacles. A sickening wave of nausea washed over me. I wanted to scream, to rise up and rip them apart. But Sarah's words echoed, play dead. Then I heard Sarah again. A faint, struggling sound. A rattle in her throat. She was fading. My heart ripped itself apart. My Sarah. My love. She wasn't going to make it. And then, just before she went silent, just before her last breath escaped her broken body, she whispered something else. Something not meant for me, but for the air, for the wind, for the universe itself to record. A desperate, almost guttural sound. He took everything. He took her. Then silence. Profound, absolute, terrifying silence. Mark and Emily exchanged a few more words, too low for me to fully decipher. Something about cleaning up and the timeline. And then their footsteps receded. They were gone. They'd left us for dead. I lay there, bleeding, broken, my wife's fresh corpse just feet away. The physical pain was immense, but the internal wound was a gaping chasm. My daughter, my son-in-law, they'd done this. And Sarah's last, dying words, he took everything. He took her. Those words didn't speak of our murder. They spoke of a deeper, darker horror. A secret betrayal, a hidden crime, far more sinister than their attempt on my life. They were the match that lit the fuse of the quiet, retired man I pretended to be. They thought I was dead. They made a mistake. And now, they were about to learn what happens when you awaken a ghost. A ghost with nothing left to lose, and a lifetime of lethal experience hidden behind a landscape designer's smile. My name isn't just John Harrison. It's Harrison, and I remember everything. And I'm coming for them. The forest floor was cold, unforgiving. My breath hitched, a ragged sound that tore my raw throat. The pain in my leg was a dull, persistent throb that promised to bloom into agony, and my left shoulder felt like it had been ripped from its socket. My head throbbed, a steady drumbeat against my skull. But more potent than any physical torment was the cold, hollow ache in my chest where my heart used to be. Sarah, gone. And Emily. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 20 minutes, listening. The sounds of the forest returned. A distant bird call, the rustle of leaves, the faint murmur of the creek below. No more footsteps, no more voices. They were truly gone. Slowly, carefully, I tested my body. My left leg was definitely broken, the bone angled unnaturally beneath my jeans. My left arm, too, seemed useless. But my right side, though bruised and scraped, was largely intact. The head wound, thankfully, wasn't actively bleeding anymore, just a sticky mess in my hair. I'd been lucky, if you could call surviving your daughter's murderous betrayal lucky. The old training, the one I thought I'd long since buried under decades of suburban tranquility, roared back to life. First rule, assess and stabilize. Second rule, secure your position. Third rule, become invisible. I closed my eyes, taking deep, slow breaths, focusing on the rhythm of my heartbeat, pushing the pain to the periphery. I'd endured worse. Once, a bullet wound in Kandahar, crawling for miles through hostile territory. Another time, a broken rib and collapsed lung in a safe house in Prague, extracting critical intel. This was bad, but not insurmountable. Not for Harrison. My right hand fumbled in my belt, finding the small, waterproof kit I always carried, a habit from my other life, one Sarah used to tease me about. Inside, a roll of medical tape, some pain pills, a small length of paracord, a multi-tool. Crude, but better than nothing. I bit down on a piece of leather from my boot, a trick I learned from a mountain man in Montana, and began to work. Tearing strips from my shirt, I fashioned a makeshift splint for my leg using fallen branches and paracord, binding it tightly. The pain was excruciating, a white-hot spear driven through my femur, but I welcomed it. It was real. It meant I was alive. And being alive meant I could figure out why. And then I could deal with the who. Next, my shoulder. Dislocated, no doubt. I knew the maneuver to pop it back in, a brutal self-inflicted torture, but necessary. I stared at the darkening sky, grit my teeth, and with a guttural roar, yanked. A sickening thwack echoed through the quiet woods. My vision blurred, sweat beaded on my forehead, but the immediate, crushing pressure eased. Now for the rest. I swallowed a handful of the strong painkillers, hoping they'd kick in soon. My immediate priority was getting out of sight. They'd assume I was dead, but complacency kills. I dragged myself, using my right arm and good leg, away from the immediate vicinity of the fall. I needed to mask any tracks, to make it look as if the forest had simply claimed us both. I found a shallow crevice beneath an overhang, hidden by thick rhododendron bushes. It was damp, cold, and smelled of decaying leaves, but it was shelter. I pulled branches over the opening, blending it into the surrounding foliage. For the time being, I was a ghost. As the last sliver of daylight vanished, plunging the forest into an inky blackness, my thoughts turned to Sarah. Her laugh, the way her hand always found mine, the smell of her skin, the comfort of her presence. 40 years, gone in an instant. A scream tried to claw its way out of my chest, but I bit it back. Not now. Not yet. Grief was a luxury I couldn't afford. Now my daughter was a murderer. My daughter, Emily, the girl I'd adored, protected, cherished. How could she? The question hammered at my brain, an incessant, agonizing rhythm. Was she always this way? Was it Mark who twisted her? Or was there a darkness in her that I, her father, had been blind to? My mind replayed her cold eyes, Mark's calculating face. They weren't just complicit. They were active participants. And then, Sarah's last words. They echoed in the silence of my makeshift grave. Don't move, John, play dead. That was for me. A final act of love, of protection, even as her own life ebbed away. It saved me. But the second whisper, the one she'd intended for the void, not for me. He took everything. He took her. The words were a puzzle, a cruel, dying riddle. Who was he? What did everything entail? And who was her? A person? A thing? My mind, despite the trauma, began to dissect it. Sarah wasn't a woman who spoke in riddles. She was direct, honest, practical. For her to utter such a fragmented, desperate plea, it had to be something monumental, something beyond our immediate predicament, something that had been gnawing at her. My life with Sarah, I realized, had been built on absolute trust. We had no secrets, or so I thought. This whisper implied a hidden layer to her life, a vulnerability she hadn't shared. It felt like a betrayal, yet her words to me, play dead, were an act of profound selflessness. The dichotomy tore at me. Was she caught in something I didn't know about? Was she protecting something, or someone, from him? And did that protection cost her life? The police. My first instinct, the civilian instinct, screamed for me to contact them, to tell them what Emily and Mark had done. But the operative in me, the Harrison I'd locked away, dismissed it immediately. Who would believe me? A man found broken and half dead at the bottom of a cliff, claiming his respectable daughter and wealthy son-in-law had pushed him? They'd write it off as a delusion brought on by head trauma or a tragic accident. Emily and Mark would weave a tale of grief, of a beloved father prone to dizzy spells. They'd cover their tracks with practiced ease, their wealth and connections insulating them. No, the police were not an option. Not yet. For the world, John and Sarah Harrison were gone, lost to the treacherous beauty of the Great Smoky Mountains. A tragic hiking accident, and Mark and Emily would be the grieving children, inheriting whatever we had, free to move on. That thought brought a fresh surge of cold rage. They planned this. They'd orchestrated our deaths for what? Money? Land? The thought was grotesque. My goals solidified in the darkness. I had to become a ghost, a phantom, to shed John Harrison entirely. And then, as a phantom, I would haunt them. I would uncover the truth behind Sarah's last words. Who he was, what everything meant, and who she was. And once I knew, I would make them pay. Not just for Sarah, not just for me, but for whatever hidden horrors Sarah tried to warn me about. The journey wouldn't be easy, not with my injuries, but a lifetime of being underestimated, of appearing harmless, of disappearing and reappearing at will, had prepared me for this. Harrison was back, and he was very, very angry. My first step, get off this mountain, unseen, unheard, and find a way to access the world without revealing I was still in it. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about resurrection and reckoning. The next 3 days were a blur of pain, stealth, and primal instinct. Moving with a broken leg and a recently reset shoulder was pure agony. Every step was a battle. I learned to leverage my weight on my good side, using fallen logs and thick tree trunks as crutches. I moved only under the cover of darkness, resting hidden during the day. The forest, once a place of solace, had become a labyrinth of threats, but it was also my ally. It hid me. It provided meager sustenance, wild berries I knew were safe, water from mountain springs. My mind, sharp and focused despite the physical suffering, plotted every inch of my escape. I thought about the rangers, the search parties that would undoubtedly be combing these slopes. I had to avoid them. Any encounter would compromise my mission. Harrison didn't get caught. Harrison didn't need rescuing. He rescued himself, and now he was hunting. I bypassed the main trails, sticking to the roughest, most overgrown terrain, using the skills I'd learned in jungles and deserts. How to move silently, how to read the wind, how to blend into the shadows. My clothes were tattered, my face a mask of grime and stubble, my body a tapestry of bruises and cuts. I was no longer John Harrison, the genial landscape designer with a penchant for prize-winning azaleas. I was something else, something harder, colder, resurrected from a grave I never thought I'd revisit. My destination was an old, abandoned hunting cabin I knew about, deep in a forgotten hollow, about 10 miles from where they pushed us. A relic from a past life, a contingency plan from decades ago that Sarah had always laughed at. Just in case the Russians finally catch up to you, John, she'd tease, but I always kept it stocked, just in case. It was bare bones, but it had a working well, a wood-burning stove, and, crucially, a solar-powered satellite internet connection I'd installed years ago, another just-in-case eccentricity. Reaching it was a monumental effort. Each dragging step sent waves of fire through my leg. The last mile was a crawl, a test of pure, unadulterated will. When I finally reached the dilapidated porch, collapsing against the splintered wood, I felt like a creature from another age, clawing its way back to existence. Inside, the cabin was dark, dusty, and smelled of old wood and forgotten memories. But it was safe. It was a base. I devoured to dry rations, drank deep from the well water, and patched myself up as best I could. The painkillers, bless their insidious hearts, began to dull the sharp edges of agony, allowing my mind a sliver of clarity. The first thing I did, after a night of restless, pain-riddled sleep, was to power up the old laptop. It hummed to life, a ghostly glow in the dim cabin. The internet connection, slow but reliable, brought the outside world into my sanctuary. News of the missing Bullwood couple was already making headlines in the local papers and online. Beloved locals vanish in tragic hiking accident. There were pictures of Sarah and me, smiling, vibrant. Our lives reduced to a saccharine obituary. Emily and Mark were front and center, playing the distraught children. Emily's eyes, red-rimmed and sorrowful, stared out from a pixelated news report, her voice breaking as she spoke of her devoted parents. Mark, looking solemn in a dark suit, spoke of our love for the outdoors and the treacherous beauty of the mountains. I watched them, my face devoid of emotion. It was a performance, flawlessly executed. The lie was so smooth, so well-rehearsed, it was almost convincing. Almost. But I'd seen their real faces, their real eyes. Then I started digging deeper. Not for news of John Harrison, but for news of Mark Thornton, my son-in-law. His name started popping up in financial news. Nothing directly related to the accident, but a flurry of activity. Several large land deals in our region, specifically around the outskirts of Asheville and Hendersonville, areas prime for development. Mark's firm, Thornton Capital, was advising a larger entity, Ethelred Corporation, a large-scale real estate developer. The name sounded ancient, vaguely Teutonic. My blood ran cold. Land, development, wealth. Had this been about our property? Our quiet, peaceful life on a sprawling tract just outside Waynesville? Our home, that had been in Sarah's family for generations, was now prime real estate, especially with the expansion of the nearby interstate. Then I remembered Sarah's whisper. He took everything. He took her. It wasn't just about money, I realized. Not just about land. Everything felt too broad, too personal for mere financial gain. And her? That still nagged at me. It felt like a human, a specific individual. Someone Sarah cared deeply about. I couldn't go to the authorities. Not as John Harrison. They'd simply shut me down, declare me a delusional survivor. My face was everywhere. I needed to disappear. Officially. Completely. And for that, I needed help. Someone who understood the shadows, who lived in the cracks of the world. Someone who owed me a favor, or five. There was only one man. Frankie Bello. My former partner from my previous life. A man who, like me, had left the game, but unlike me, had never truly retired from its darker side. He ran a dive bar in the French Quarter of New Orleans called the Voodoo Lounge, a place where secrets were exchanged more often than drinks. He was a master of information, a fixer, a man who could conjure anything from ghost identities to untraceable assets with a phone call and a few favors. Reaching Frankie would be a challenge. I had limited resources. My old safe deposit box in Asheville, containing a modest stash of emergency cash and an untraceable burner phone, was my first objective. Getting there would require absolute stealth and a lot of pain. I spent another day recuperating, eating small, nutrient-rich meals I'd stored, and planning my route. My car, of course, was still at the trailhead parking lot. Leaving it, there was a calculated risk. It would reinforce the hiking accident narrative. I needed to make my way to Asheville without being seen. Under the cloak of the next night, wrapped in a blanket I'd found in the cabin, I began my painful trek. I walked along overgrown power line access roads, through farmers' fields, avoiding paved roads and any human contact. I was a phantom, moving through the moonlit Appalachian landscape, a ghost hunting for his past. It took me another full day to reach Asheville. I looked like a homeless drifter, bruised, limping, my clothes torn. No one paid me a second glance. I knew the city well, its hidden alleys, its quieter corners. I found a small, grimy motel on the outskirts, paid cash, and bought some new, nondescript clothes. I shaved off my stubble, dyed my hair a darker shade with a cheap box of color from a discount store, and bought some strong contact lenses to cover my distinctive blue eyes. John Harrison, the beloved local, was gone. Now there was just a tired-looking man, blend in the crowd anonymous. The bank visit was swift and clinical. My safety deposit box contained enough cash to get me where I needed to go and set up an initial base. More importantly, it had the burner phone. Old school, untraceable, exactly what I needed. My call to Frankie was brief, coded. No names, no specifics. Just a cryptic message about an old project that went sideways and a need for a quiet corner in the Crescent City. He knew my voice, knew my code. His gruff got it. See you when you get here was all the confirmation I needed. Getting to New Orleans, injured and off the grid, was an exercise in improvisation. No flights, No bus tickets under my real name. I used cash, took a series of Greyhound buses, changing lines several times, always buy my tickets just before departure, never lingering. I slept little, ate sparingly, and watched everyone. The paranoia of my past life had returned, a constant, low hum beneath my skin. Every face was a potential threat, every casual glance a possible recognition. As the bus rumbled south, leaving the misty mountains behind for the sweltering humidity of the Gulf Coast, my mind was consumed by Sarah's last whisper. He took everything. He took her. The phrase was a loop, a broken record in my head. Who was this? What did he take that was so vital, so devastating, that it became her final thought? Was it related to the land deals? Was her a person whose well-being was tied to whatever this Ethelred corporation was doing? The landscape blurred outside the window, endless stretches of highway, billboards advertising everything from local barbecue joints to strip malls. I was no longer a victim. I was an investigator, a hunter, a ghost in the machine, returning to a world I thought I'd left behind. And somewhere my daughter and son-in-law were living their lives, enjoying their ill-gotten gains, blissfully unaware that the accident they engineered had only unleashed a far more dangerous foe. New Orleans, the city of secrets, the perfect place for a dead man to plot his revenge. New Orleans hits you like a humid punch to the gut, even in late autumn. The air is thick with the smell of jasmine, stale beer, and something vaguely metallic from the Mississippi River. It's a city that breathes secrets, where shadows cling to gas lamps and history whispers from every wrought iron balcony. For a dead man, it was home, or, at least, a temporary haven. The Voodoo Lounge wasn't hard to find. It never was. Tucked away on a quiet side street, just off Bourbon, it had a peeling facade and a neon sign that flickered lazily. Inside, it was perpetually dim, lit by strings of fairy lights and the glow of an old jukebox. The air was thick with the scent of whiskey and something herbal, a blend of sage and something else, something vaguely mystical that Frankie probably cooked up himself. This was his sanctuary, and mine for now. I pushed open the door, the bell above chiming softly. Frankie was behind the bar, polishing a glass with a practiced, almost ritualistic motion. He was a bear of a man, even in his late 60s, with a receding hairline, a grizzled beard, and eyes that had seen too much. He hadn't changed much, not really. Still wore his perpetually stained apron, still had that same tired, knowing look. He glanced up, his eyes scanning me without a flicker of recognition for John Harrison. But for the man standing before him, the man who was now just a ghost, he knew. Whiskey, I rasped, my voice still rough from the mountain air and disuse. Double neat. He set the glass down, his gaze finally settling on my face. A slow blink, then a slight, almost imperceptible tilt of his head. Thought you retired from that stuff, Harrison, he muttered, his voice a low rumble. Figured you were all organic kale and sunshine these days. He poured the whiskey without asking, slid it across the worn counter. I picked it up, feeling the familiar warmth of the glass in my hand. I took a long pull. It burned, a welcome sensation that cut through the numbness. Things change, Frankie, I said, meeting his gaze. Some retirements, they don't stick. He wiped down the counter in front of me. Looks like you ran into a few sharp edges on the way back. Your leg looks like a bad day at the lumber mill. Worse than a lumber mill, I replied, my voice flat. Family business. His eyes, usually clouded with a detached amusement, sharpened. He leaned closer, resting his forearms on the bar. Family business can be the nastiest kind. What happened, Harrison? I told him. Everything. The hike. The push. The fall. Sarah's last whisper. Emily. Mark. I didn't spare any detail, didn't try to soften the edges. Frankie listened, his face a granite mask. His eyes never left mine, searching, analyzing, believing. He knew the difference between a broken man and a man who had merely been broken into pieces and was now methodically putting himself back together. When I finished, the silence in the bar was heavy, broken only by the mournful wail of a saxophone from somewhere down the street. Frankie didn't say anything for a long moment. He just stood there, staring at the amber liquid in my glass. Then he slammed his fist lightly on the bar. "God damn them," he growled, the words low and vibrating with a suppressed fury. "Your own daughter? And that slick son of a bitch, Mark? I never liked that guy. Too much cologne, not enough soul." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a familiar fire. "Sarah was a good woman, John. The best. She deserved better than that." A lump formed in my throat. "She did," I agreed, my voice thick with unshed tears. "She deserved everything. And she died trying to tell me something, Frankie. Something about him and her and everything he took. It wasn't just about our lives. It was about something bigger. Something hidden." Frankie nodded slowly. "So, not just a murder, but a cover-up for something else. Figures. These Wall Street sharks, they don't just kill for a quick buck. They kill to protect the ocean they swim in." He pushed a fresh double whiskey across the bar. "You want to find out what, John? You know I'm your man. I do. I confirmed. And I need everything you've got. Dig into Mark Thornton. Dig into his company, Thornton Capital. Dig into Ethelred Corporation. Who are they? What are they doing in North Carolina? Especially around Waynesville, Asheville. I want everything. Financial records, background checks, their network. Every skeleton in every closet." Frankie's eyes glinted. "Consider it done. I've got a few favors to call in. Old contacts. Some hackers who owe me a pine or 20. I'll start with public records, then get into the deep web. You just focus on healing that leg and try not to scare away my regulars." He paused. "You'll be staying here, of course. Got a spare room upstairs. Discreet." I nodded, grateful. "Thanks, Frankie. Don't thank me. Just make sure those bastards get what's coming to them." For Sarah. The next few days were spent in the quiet confines of the room above the Voodoo Lounge. Frankie brought me food, kept my painkiller stocked, and, most importantly, brought me information. He worked with a quiet intensity, his fingers flying across keyboards in the back office, making calls in hushed tones. The initial reports confirmed my suspicions. Mark Thornton wasn't just a middling financial advisor. He was a rising star, known for aggressive tactics and securing large-scale development deals. Thornton Capital wasn't some independent powerhouse. It was a front, a subsidiary for Ethelred Corporation, a massive, shadowy conglomerate based out of Chicago, with holdings in everything from construction to mining to waste management. Their reach was extensive, their methods often less than ethical. "These guys are bad news, John," Frankie reported one evening, dropping a stack of printouts on my table. "They're buying up huge swathes of land in western North Carolina. Not just any land, either. Pristine, untouched forest. And not for typical residential development." "What then?" I asked, poring over the maps and property deeds. My old property, Sarah's property, was circled. A crucial piece, strategically located. "That's the thing," Frankie said, leaning back. "There's no clear plan for these parcels. No zoning permits filed for large-scale housing or commercial centers. Just acquisition. And a lot of it is being done through shell corporations. Untraceable cash. Real cloak and dagger stuff." Then came the next piece of the puzzle. And guess who's facilitating a lot of these deals on the ground? Frankie tapped a photo on one of the documents. Mayor Patrick O'Connor of Waynesville, North Carolina. O'Connor, the mayor of our small town. A seemingly jovial, good OL boy politician, always glad-handing at community events. But he'd always had a greedy glint in his eye. Now made sense. He was connected. A dirty politician, clearing the path for Ethelred Corporation's questionable activities, undoubtedly lining his own pockets in the process. So, Mark and Emily push us off a cliff, hoping to inherit our property, which is crucial to Ethelred's plans, facilitated by a corrupt mayor. I summarized, the pieces starting to click into place. It's a neat, tidy package for them. It would be, Frankie agreed. Except for one thing. He paused, picking up another printout. "This is where it gets interesting, John. And this changes everything." He handed me a financial statement. It detailed a series of incredibly shrewd investments made over the past 15 years. Not by me, not by our joint accounts, but by Sarah. Sarah Harrison. My jaw tightened. "What is this?" "Your wife, John," Frankie said slowly, was a hell of a lot smarter with money than either of us ever gave her credit for. These are her personal investments, handled through an offshore account, completely separate from your joint finances. She started small, but she had an uncanny knack for picking winners. Tech stocks before they boomed. Real estate opportunities no one else saw. By my conservative estimate, your Sarah was sitting on over $15 million. All hidden, all unknown to you. The air left my lungs. $15 million. Sarah, my Sarah, who meticulously budgeted our grocery money and clipped coupons. The woman who wore the same gardening clothes for years. She'd been a secret financial prodigy, a part of her life I knew absolutely nothing about. The betrayal of Emily and Mark paled in comparison to the realization that my wife, my partner of 4 decades, had kept such a colossal secret from me. But then, the initial shock gave way to another thought, a more terrifying one. And what exactly did she invest in, Frankie? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Frankie pointed to a line item on the statement. Specifically, John, among other things, she owned the deed to the property adjacent to yours. That critical piece of land that Ethelred Corporation absolutely needs to complete their consolidated acquisition. The one the mayor couldn't get for them. The world tilted on its axis. My wife, she didn't just own some land. She owned the land. The crucial, indispensable piece that held up Ethelred's entire operation. And she had, for some reason, chosen not to sell it, or had been unable to. He took everything. He took her. The whisper echoed again, but now it resonated with terrifying clarity. Everything wasn't just my life or our property. It was her own carefully built, secret fortune. And her refusal to sell this specific land must have been the ultimate obstacle for Mark and Ethelred. They didn't just want our land. They wanted her land, her secret wealth, and her life. And then, the chilling question, who was her? Frankie, I said, my voice low, dangerous. Check Sarah's personal life. Any connections outside of me and Emily? Any charities? Any specific people she was helping? Anything at all that isn't us? Frankie saw the change in my eyes. The casual rage had hardened into something cold, methodical, precise. He understood. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about unearthing a truth far larger and more intricate than a simple family murder. And Sarah, my seemingly simple, loving wife, was at the very heart of it. A woman I thought I knew completely was now a mystery, whose last whisper had turned my world into a complex web of deceit, money, and murder. The $15 million was a gut punch, not the money itself. Wealth had never been my primary motivator, not after what I'd seen and done. It was the secrecy. 40 years. A lifetime of shared jokes, whispered confessions, intimate silences. And she had kept this entire, massive part of her life completely separate. A parallel existence, unknown to me. The thought was a bitter pill. Was our marriage a lie? Was she a lie? Frankie, seeing the turmoil in my eyes, just clapped me on the shoulder. Don't jump to conclusions, John. Sarah loved you. We both know that. There's got to be a reason. He was right. Sarah wasn't a malicious woman. She wasn't deceitful in her nature. There had to be something more. Something she was protecting. And now I had to find out what. This quest for justice had just transformed into a desperate search for understanding. I needed to understand Sarah. My next step had to be my old house. The one Emily and Mark would now consider theirs, albeit through a protracted legal process of proving our deaths. But it was still filled with her things. Her essence. And possibly her secrets. It was a risk, a dangerous one, to go back to the scene of the crime in such proximity to my daughter and son-in-law. But it was a necessary one. I left New Orleans a few days later, a new alias, a new look, and a fresh set of untraceable tools from Frankie. He'd procured a small, nondescript van, equipped with a Faraday cage to prevent tracking and some basic surveillance gear, miniature cameras, audio bugs, a sophisticated lock-picking kit. Frankie was thorough. "Be careful, John," he'd said as I was leaving. "That girl is your blood. Don't let it blind you." I nodded. "I know what I'm doing, Frankie." The drive back to Waynesville was a somber journey. Each mile closer felt like twisting the knife in my gut. My home, The place where Sarah and I had built our life was now a monument to betrayal. I arrived under the cover of a moonless night, parking the van a few blocks away in a residential area, blending in with the other contractors' vehicles. My limp was less pronounced now, thanks to Frankie's supply of stronger pain medication and a custom brace he'd found for my leg. My shoulder was still a dull ache, but usable. I was no longer an invalid. I was Harrison, ghost in the machine. The house stood dark and silent. A for sale sign, hastily erected, stood on the lawn. They weren't even waiting for the official probate. They were moving fast. Too fast. That confirmed it. They needed to liquidate assets, or clear the way for Ethelred's plans. I circled the perimeter, my senses on high alert. No alarms, no obvious security. Emily and Mark were either arrogant or stupid, or both. I chose a rear entrance, a familiar window above the utility room that had a notoriously sticky latch. In less than a minute, I was inside. The air was heavy, stale, with the ghost of Sarah's lavender scent. Everything was exactly as we'd left it. Her knitting projects on the sofa, my reading glasses on the bedside table. The silence screamed her absence. I swallowed the lump in my throat. No time for grief. Not yet. I installed the discreet cameras and audio bugs first, in the living room, kitchen, and the master bedroom. Emily and Mark would be here soon enough, probably to pack up belongings, or more likely, to gloat. I needed to see and hear everything. Then, I began my search for Sarah's secrets. $15 million. That kind of financial life doesn't just exist in a vacuum. There had to be a ledger, a safe, something. I went through her things systematically, methodically. Not just surface items, but every hidden compartment, every loose floorboard, every hollow book. My experience taught me where people hid things, not always where you'd expect. Hours passed. The house felt like a tomb. I found nothing until I reached her small, private study, a room she'd always considered her sanctuary, filled with books on horticulture and obscure history. On a whim, I ran my hand along the bottom of her old mahogany desk, and there it was, a faint seam, a hidden drawer. It contained a small, leather-bound journal, and a key. The key was for a safe deposit box, not the one I used. Another secret. The journal, though, was what captured my attention. It wasn't a diary of daily events, but more a record of thoughts, observations, and transactions. Coded, but I knew Sarah's shorthand. I knew her mind. As I began to decipher the entries, the true breadth of her secret life unfolded. The investments, yes, detailed and meticulously tracked. The offshore accounts, the land deeds, everything Frankie had found, and more. But interwoven with these financial notes were other entries. Names, dates, locations, and a recurring name, Lillian. Lillian. The name jumped out at me. He took her, the piece clicked. Sarah's last whisper wasn't some abstract concept. It was about a person. Lillian. I read on, my blood running cold. Lillian was an orphan, a young woman, barely 20, who Sarah had taken under her wing years ago, anonymously funding her education, providing her with emotional support, becoming a surrogate mother figure. Lillian lived a few towns over, studying environmental science at a local community college. She was bright, passionate, and deeply committed to environmental causes. She had become Sarah's secret passion project. Then, the journal entries grew frantic. Sarah had discovered something. Lillian, during an internship, had stumbled upon evidence of illegal activity connected to Ethelred Corporation. Not just land speculation. Something far more sinister. Toxic waste dumping. Illegal mining of rare earth elements. Using the pristine mountain lands they were acquiring as a cover for their environmental crimes. Polluting the very streams and forests we cherished. Lillian had gathered evidence, photos, soil samples, and she'd trusted Sarah with it. Sarah, it became clear, hadn't just invested in the critical land parcel. She had bought it, specifically to prevent Ethelred Corporation from acquiring it and expanding their illegal operations. She was leveraging her secret wealth to fight them, silently, persistently. She was a silent warrior, protecting her community, the land, and this young woman, Lillian, who had unwittingly become a target. My initial anger at her secrecy melted away, replaced by a profound sense of awe and a searing, unbearable grief. She hadn't betrayed me. She had been protecting me, protecting us all, from a monster I hadn't even known existed in our quiet corner of the world. She'd gone to war, alone, to save what she loved. The last entries in the journal were chilling. Sarah suspected she was being watched. She suspected Mark. She had tried to get Lillian to go into hiding, to turn over the evidence to a trusted environmental watchdog group. But before she could, we went on that hike. He took everything. He took her. It was no longer a riddle. It was Mark, or rather, Ethelred Corporation, using Mark as their instrument. Everything was her life, her fortune, her fight against their corruption. And her was Lillian. They hadn't just murdered Sarah for her land and money. They'd murdered her to silence her, and to get to Lillian, who held the real dirt on their operations. Lillian was now missing, almost certainly in their hands. A cold, methodical fury settled over me. Mark and Emily had not just killed my wife. They had inadvertently exposed a much larger, darker conspiracy. And they had taken a young woman who Sarah was fighting to protect. I put the journal carefully away, securing the hidden drawer. The grief was still there, a dull throb, but it was now overshadowed by a burning, focused purpose. I was no longer just avenging Sarah. I was finishing her fight and rescuing Lillian. Just as I finished setting up a perimeter alarm using my old tripwires, I heard the faint sound of a car pulling up the driveway. Emily and Mark. My heart rate didn't even spike. I slipped into the shadows, a ghost in my own home, ready to observe the monsters who had murdered my wife and, unknowingly, awakened a far more dangerous foe. Let them walk into their new, tainted kingdom. Let them talk. I was listening, and I was learning, and soon they would pay a price far greater than they could ever imagine. The muffled voices of Emily and Mark drifted through the vents, amplified by the bugs Frankie had supplied. I sat in a cramped utility closet, hidden amongst old cleaning supplies and forgotten tools, listening. The air was thick with dust and the cold clarity of revelation. "This house is a mess," Emily grumbled, her voice sharp, devoid of any genuine sorrow. "Why do Mom keep so much junk? And that horrible floral wallpaper, honestly." "Just get the valuables, Emmy," Mark said, his tone impatient. "We need to get this place prepped for sale. Ethelred wants the land cleared quickly. The sooner we liquidate, the sooner we can consolidate my position." "Consolidate your position?" Emily scoffed. "You mean by that ridiculously overpriced yet you've been drooling over?" A pause. Then Mark's voice, colder. "Watch your tone, Emily. This isn't just about money for us. This is about power and control. Ethelred isn't some mom-and-pop shop. They're a force, and they're rewarding my efficiency." My hands clenched. Efficiency. They call my wife's murder efficiency. They moved through the house, their footsteps echoing through the empty rooms, their casual callousness a fresh wound. They argued about furniture, about money, about Emily's spending habits. Never once a word about Sarah, about me. No grief, no regret, just transactional greed. "My daughter, my God, did you make sure everything was cleaned up at the site?" Emily asked, a flicker of anxiety in her voice. "No weaknesses." "Of course," Mark snapped. "I checked it myself. The creek bed is remote. They won't even find the bodies for weeks, if at all. And by then, the bears and coyotes, nature takes care of itself. Just like the police will. Tragique king accident. Open and shut." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "They don't even have a murder weapon, do they? Just a convenient cliff." I almost broke cover. But Sarah's whisper, "Play dead," held me back. They were secure in their fantasy. Good. Let them be. As they continued to catalog items, dismiss our memories, and bicker like petty children, I downloaded what I could from the house's internet connection. Old photos, Sarah's digital calendar, anything that might hold a clue. I found a recurring appointment on Sarah's calendar, once a month, for a study group that coincided with her visits to Lillian. She had been careful. I watched them for 2 days, moving between the closet and the hidden space beneath the floorboards in the study. They revealed nothing more of immediate value about Lillian's whereabouts, but their sheer arrogance and detachment solidified my resolve. There was no going back. Emily had chosen her side. Just as I was about to retrieve my gear and move on, a new voice echoed from the living room. Deeper, more authoritative. "Agent Stone, FBI. I'd like to speak with Mr. and Mrs. Thornton, please." My heart gave a jolt. The FBI? That was unexpected. I pressed my ear closer to the vent. "Agent Stone." Mark's voice, now smooth and oozing fake charm. "What an unexpected pleasure. I believe my wife has been in contact with local law enforcement about our tragic loss." "She has, Mr. Thornton," Stone replied, his voice calm, even-keeled, but with an underlying steel. "But certain discrepancies have emerged. The local sheriff's department contacted us." "Discrepancies?" Emily asked, her voice tight with thinly veiled panic. "The location where your parents supposedly fell, for instance," Stone continued. "A known hiking trail, yes, but usually well-trafficked. Yet, no other hikers reported seeing them that day, and the weather conditions were ideal. No sudden storms, no ice. Furthermore, the forensics team noted a distinct lack of struggle marks on the ground near the edge. No signs of a slip. It was unnaturally clean." My professional antennae immediately straightened. This Agent Stone was good. He wasn't swallowing the tragic accident narrative. He was looking deeper. "Well, Agent, my father was a bit unsteady on his feet sometimes," Emily stammered. "And my mother, she had poor peripheral vision." "Really?" Stone's tone was skeptical. "The medical reports from their last checkups don't indicate any such issues, Mrs. Thornton. In fact, Mr. Harrison was remarkably fit for his age, and Mrs. Harrison's vision was 20/20 according to her last DMV exam." Mark stepped in, his voice taking on an edge of indignation. "Look, Agent, we're grieving. This is a very sensitive time. Are you suggesting we had something to do with our parents' disappearance?" "I'm not suggesting anything, Mr. Thornton," Stone said smoothly. "I'm investigating. And when a couple vanishes without a trace from a seemingly safe location, and their immediate family stands to inherit a considerable amount of land that is now highly valuable to a development corporation you represent, well, it raises questions, doesn't it?" I allowed myself a small, grim smile in the darkness of the closet. "Bravo, Agent Stone. This is an outrage," Emily cried, feigning tears. "How dare you?" "I'm just doing my job, ma'am," Stone replied, his voice betraying no emotion. "And my job often involves following the money, especially when the money trail leads to the sudden disappearance of two innocent people. And it leads directly to Ethelred Corporation, Mr. Thornton. A company, I might add, that has faced multiple environmental violation charges in other states. They were getting careless. Their arrogance was blinding them." Stone continued to question them, calmly, meticulously, poking holes in their flimsy story. Emily crumbled, becoming defensive and tearful. Mark, ever the shark, maintained a facade of indignant innocence, but I could hear the subtle tremor in his voice, the suppressed panic. The FBI agent was a game-changer. I realized I couldn't simply ignore him. He was a potential ally, or, if I wasn't careful, a major obstacle. I needed to guide him subtly, to feed him information that would keep him on Mark and Ethelred's trail without ever revealing my own existence. After Stone left, promising to continue his investigation, the real panic set in for Emily and Mark. "He knows, Mark," Emily shrieked. "He suspects. What are we going to do?" "Relax, Emmy," Mark said, but his voice was strained. "He has nothing concrete. Just suspicions. We stick to our story. And I'll make a few calls. I have connections in D.C. This will all blow over. What about the land? What about Mom's secret investments? And, Lillian," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. "I almost missed it." "Lillian," Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Lillian is secure. She's being held at the old mining camp in Pisgah. Ethelred's muscle is watching her. She won't talk. She's too scared." He paused. "And her evidence is gone. We took care of that." Pisgah, the old mining camp. It was deep in the mountains, a known, dilapidated site used by various shadowy groups for illicit activities over the years. My blood ran cold. Lillian was alive, but a prisoner. And the evidence. What evidence? And Mom's money? Emily pressed. Are we getting that too? It's complicated, Mark admitted, his voice frustrated. Those offshore accounts are locked tight. And the land, the deed is nowhere to be found. It's not with her other papers. It's like it vanished into thin air. We need that deed, Emily. Without it, Ethelred's entire Pisgah Valley project is stalled. They were desperate. That explained the haste to sell my house, to liquidate assets. They needed Sarah's secret deed, and I knew exactly where it was. Tucked inside the hidden compartment of the safe deposit box, the one Sarah's key opened, the one Frankie would soon be accessing for me. My plan began to form, precise and lethal. Agent Stone was a crucial piece. He was the legitimate authority. I would become his unseen hand, guiding him toward the truth, piling up evidence against Mark, Emily, Mayor O'Connor, and Ethelred Corporation. I would make sure he had everything he needed. And while he gathered his legal noose, I would go to Pisgah. I would free Lillian. And then, the final confrontation. Not just for revenge, but for Sarah, for Lillian, for justice. My ghosts had returned. And now, I would make sure others joined them. The revelation about the old mining camp in Pisgah and Lillian's imprisonment fueled a cold, relentless fire within me. Sarah wasn't just protecting land. She was protecting a living, breathing young woman from a corrupt corporation and my own murderous family. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was a rescue mission, and the stakes had just gone stratospheric. Frankie, ever efficient, had already located the safe deposit box Sarah's key unlocked. It was in a small, out-of-the-way bank in Chapel Hill, a place far enough from Waynesville to avoid immediate scrutiny. Inside, just as I suspected, was the original deed for the critical land parcel and a sealed envelope containing Lillian's original evidence. Meticulously documented soil samples, photographs, and detailed logs of illegal dumping and mining operations. Sarah, my quiet, unassuming wife, had been a true hero. My heart swelled with a mixture of pride and crushing sorrow. Now, with this information, I had the ultimate leverage. I knew what Ethelred Corporation and Mark were truly after. I had the missing deed, and soon I would have Lillian and her evidence. It was time to set the stage for their downfall, and that meant a direct, albeit disguised, confrontation with Mark. I needed to see his face, to hear his plans, to let him unknowingly dig his own grave. I had Frankie arrange a discreet meeting, not with Mark directly, but with a representative of a fictitious high-net-worth investor looking to acquire large tracts of land in western North Carolina. The bait was irresistible, a potential new buyer for the very land Ethelred Corporation coveted, and a chance for Mark to flex his deal-making muscles. My disguise was meticulously crafted. A custom-made prosthetic nose that altered the bridge of my face, tinted contact lenses that changed my eye color from blue to a dark hazel, and a meticulously applied wig that transformed my sparse gray hair into a thick salt and pepper mane. I wore an impeccably tailored, conservative suit that screamed old money, quiet power. My posture was subtly altered, my limp carefully masked by a slight, almost imperceptible swagger. Even my voice was different, a deeper, more refined timbre, courtesy of years of mimicry training. I was now Mr. Alastair Finch, a reclusive but immensely wealthy land developer from Connecticut with a penchant for quiet investments. The meeting was set for a private dining room in an upscale Asheville restaurant, the kind of place Mark would frequent. I arrived first, taking a corner table, observing. The restaurant buzzed with the low hum of polite conversation, clinking silverware, and the clinking of expensive wine glasses. Mark arrived precisely on time, accompanied by a burly, silent man in a dark suit, a bodyguard. Typical. He spotted me immediately, his eyes, sharp and predatory, assessing my appearance, my demeanor. He walked with an air of practiced confidence, a sleek predator in an expensive suit. But I could see the subtle signs of stress beneath the polished facade, the faint shadows under his eyes, the almost imperceptible tremor in his left hand when he gestured. Agent Stone was getting to him. Good. He offered a smooth, confident smile. Mr. Finch, a pleasure. Mark Thornton. He extended a hand. I took it. His grip was firm, but I felt a barely perceptible slickness of sweat. He was nervous. "Mr. Thornton," I replied, my voice calm, modulated. "Thank you for taking the time. I trust your journey was agreeable." "Always a pleasure to discuss potential opportunities," he said, pulling out a chair. His bodyguard stood silently by the door. "What brings a gentleman of your extensive portfolio to our humble mountains?" I leaned back, steeple my fingers. "Privacy, Mr. Thornton. An opportunity. I've been quietly consolidating a number of holdings, particularly parcels that offer unique long-term potential. In your firm, Ethelred Corporation has certainly been active in this region." I let the name hang in the air, watching his reaction. A flicker of something in his eyes. "Caution. Ethelred is indeed heavily invested here," Mark confirmed, regaining his composure. "They see the future. Undeveloped tracts, strategic locations. Tremendous upside." "I'm sure they do," I agreed, taking a sip of the expensive, sparkling water I'd ordered. "I'm particularly interested in a specific parcel, the one adjacent to the old Harrison estate. A key piece, I understand, that Ethelred has been struggling to acquire." Mark stiffened, his smile faltering slightly. "Ah, yes. The Harrison property. A tragic situation, of course. Wonderful people. Salt of the earth. But the land, it's problematic. Tied up in probate. And the adjacent parcel you mentioned, it belonged to Mrs. Harrison. She was difficult to negotiate with." He gave a dismissive shrug, trying to mask his discomfort. Stubborn old woman. My grip on the glass tightened, but my face remained impassive. "Indeed, I've heard rumors that Mrs. Harrison had, shall we say, a more principled view of land use, and that her resistance was a significant impediment to Ethelred's plans for the Pisgah Valley." Mark leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Look, Mr. Finch, with all due respect, those are just rumors. The truth is, the Harrisons were an obstacle. They simply wouldn't sell. And now, tragically, they're gone. The land will be available soon enough." He smirked, a chilling flash of his true self. Sometimes a little natural selection clears the path for progress. The casual depravity of his words was sickening. I felt a surge of rage, cold and absolute, but kept it locked behind Alistair Finch's serene gaze. "Natural selection, you say? Interesting philosophy." I paused, letting the silence hang heavy. "And this Pisgah Valley project, I understand it's quite ambitious. Environmentally sensitive, one might say." He waved a dismissive hand. "Environmentalists are always crying wolf. We have all the necessary permits, all the studies. Ethelred is a reputable company." "Indeed," I countered, my voice laced with subtle irony, "though I've heard whispers of some less than reputable activities. Certain off-the-books operations in the region. Illegal dumping, untraceable mining." Mark's face went rigid. His eyes darted to his bodyguard. "I don't know what you're referring to, Mr. Finch. Ethelred operates strictly within the law." "Of course," I said, a slight, knowing smile playing on my lips. "But let's be frank, Mr. Thornton. I'm not interested in platitudes. I'm interested in opportunity. And if Ethelred has certain unconventional methods, and if those methods are being jeopardized by a lingering investigation, or perhaps by a witness, then my offer for that key parcel becomes even more valuable. Because I can provide discretion and a solution." His eyes narrowed, trying to read me. He was clearly rattled. "What kind of solution are you proposing, Mr. Finch?" "For instance," I said, leaning closer, my voice dropping to an almost conspiratorial whisper, "I hear there's a young woman, a former student, who recently stumbled onto some rather inconvenient truths about Ethelred's operations in Pisgah. A Miss Lillian Davies, I believe her name is. She seems to have vanished recently." The color drained from Mark's face. His eyes widened, a flicker of pure terror. He knew. He knew I knew. His hand instinctively went to his side, as if reaching for a non-existent weapon. His bodyguard shifted, sensing the change in atmosphere. I have no idea what you're talking about," Mark stammered, but his voice was thin, reedy. The smooth facade had cracked. He was just a scared little boy playing with big boys' toys. "Don't you, Mr. Thornton?" I said, my voice dangerously soft. Because I also happen to know that Miss Davies is currently being held at Ethelred's old mining camp in Pisgah under the watchful eye of their security detail. A rather crude detention facility, I understand. Not very reputable for a company that operates strictly within the law. Mark pushed back from the table, knocking his chair slightly. "This conversation is over," he hissed, his face a mask of panic and fury. "You're making accusations, Mr. Finch. Slanderous accusations." I met his gaze, my eyes now holding a glint of the cold steel I'd hidden for decades. "Am I, Mr. Thornton? Or am I simply offering you a chance to make a very lucrative deal before those accusations become public, along with the whereabouts of Miss Davies and the full extent of Ethelred's environmental impact on these beautiful mountains?" He stared at me, his chest heaving. He was trapped. He saw it. He finally saw the trap. "What do you want?" He finally choked out, defeated. "I want a comprehensive list of all Ethelred Corporation's illegal operations, with locations and dates," I stated, my voice firm. "I want a full confession detailing your involvement, and Emily's, in the disappearance of John and Sarah Harrison. And I want to know exactly who gave the orders. In exchange, I can make sure the deed to the critical land parcel, the one your company desperately needs, falls into the right hands. And perhaps certain inconvenient witnesses remain out of the public eye." I was playing him hard. Lillian would be rescued, but he didn't need to know that. Mark looked like a cornered animal. He knew I had him. He knew I wasn't just a simple investor. He didn't know who I was, but he knew I was dangerous. He also knew he had no choice. "Give me 24 hours, he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll get you what you want." I smiled, a calm, chilling smile that I knew my construction crews in my old life recognized as the prelude to a very expensive lesson. "Excellent, Mr. Thornton. I'll be in touch. Don't disappoint me, because unlike your current problems, my patience is very limited." I rose, leaving him trembling at the table. His bodyguard made a move to stop me, but I simply met his gaze, my eyes promising consequences he wouldn't want to face. He hesitated, then backed down. As I walked out into the cool Asheville night, the satisfaction was immense but fleeting. I had gathered valuable intelligence. I had confirmed Lillian's location, and I had Mark exactly where I wanted him. But the real work was yet to begin. I had bought myself a precious 24 hours. Now it was time to move, to become the ghost again, to rescue Lillian, and to deliver true justice, not just to Mark and Emily, but to the entire rotten system they represented. The 24 hours I granted Mark Thornton felt like an eternity, yet simultaneously no time at all. Every second was a pulse beat, a countdown to the reckoning. My meeting with him in Asheville hadn't just confirmed Lillian's location and Ethelred's dirty dealings. It had sent a tremor through their carefully constructed web of lies. Mark, for all his bluster, was a coward at heart. He would crack. And when he did, I needed to be ready to catch all the pieces. Back in the anonymous van, parked deep in a forgotten corner of a national forest campground, I relayed the intelligence to Frankie. His voice, usually gruff, held a note of grim satisfaction. "Pisgah mining camp, huh? Nasty place. Known for unsavory characters. Ethelred probably uses it as a private black site. But at least we know Lillian's alive. That's something." "It's everything, Frankie," I corrected, my voice firm. "Sarah died to protect her. And her evidence. We're finishing Sarah's fight." We spent the next few hours meticulously planning the extraction. Frankie's network was already hard at work, mapping out the camp security, identifying patrols, access points, and potential blind spots. He pulled up satellite images, topographical maps, and old blueprints of the abandoned mine tunnels. The information flowed, precise and critical, a symphony of intelligence gathering. "Looks like they've got a small, rotating security detail," Frankie reported, pointing to a schematic on a tablet screen. "Mostly ex-military types, but not special forces. More like glorified rent-a-cops with heavy weapons. They're complacent, John. Overconfident. They don't expect anyone to come looking for a ghost and a missing environmental activist." "Good," I said. Complacency is a weapon. Simultaneously, Frankie was feeding Agent Stone carefully curated, anonymous tips. Not direct calls, but encrypted emails, untraceable drops to secure channels. Each tip was a breadcrumb, pointing towards Ethelred Corporation's environmental violations, Mayor O'Connor's corruption, and the suspicious nature of the Harrison accident. I wasn't just leaving a trail. I was constructing a roadmap, guiding the FBI directly to the heart of the conspiracy without revealing the puppet master. "Stone's moving fast," Frankie commented, eyes glued to a news feed. He just secured a federal warrant to raid Ethelred's regional offices. Probable cause for environmental fraud, money laundering, and obstruction of justice. He's also looking to question Mayor O'Connor. Excellent, I murmured. The legal noose was tightening. While the FBI handled the corporate and political aspects, I would handle the physical, the rescue, and the final, personal confrontation. Then came the moral dilemma that had been gnawing at me since I'd witnessed Emily's cold eyes on the cliff. Emily, my daughter, my blood. She was a murderer, an accomplice to horrific crimes. Yet, a tiny, fractured piece of my heart still clung to the image of the little girl who used to laugh in my arms. Could she be saved? Was there any redemption for her? Or had she crossed a line from which there was no return? I thought of Sarah and her fierce, unwavering sense of right and wrong. She would demand justice, even for her own child, if that child had become a monster. But she would also want a chance at redemption, if it truly existed. My plan for Emily was a gamble. I wouldn't protect her from the law. She would face the consequences of her actions. But I would, perhaps, offer her a chance to break free from Mark's poisonous influence, to see the monster she had become, and perhaps, just perhaps, to choose a different path. It was a faint hope, a father's last, desperate wish, but I had to try. The day of the operation dawned, clear and cold. I spent it in quiet preparation, sharpening my combat knife, checking my gear, meditating, clearing my mind of all distractions save for the mission. My leg, though still painful, was functional. My body, hardened by decades of extreme conditions, was ready. Harrison was ready. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the western sky in fiery hues, I felt a familiar calmness settle over me. It was the calm before the storm, the tranquility of a predator before the strike. My personal grief, my internal conflict, was temporarily shelved. Now, there was only the mission. Rescue Lillian. Expose Ethelred. Deliver justice for Sarah. The image of Emily and Mark, laughing over our presumed deaths, flashed through my mind. They thought they had won. They thought they had silenced me, silenced Sarah, and silenced Lillian. They thought they were untouchable. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The night would bring the reckoning. The net was drawn taut, stretched to its breaking point. All that remained was to snap it shut. The air was frigid, biting at my exposed skin as I moved through the dense forest, a phantom in the moonless night. The Pisgah mining camp was a desolate scar on the landscape, a relic of greed and forgotten promises, now repurposed for darker endeavors. The skeletal remains of old derricks and dilapidated shacks cast long, distorted shadows under the faint starlight. Smoke curled from a single chimney, indicating a central heating source, and a few dim lights glowed from a fortified building, likely where Lillian was being held. My heart was a drum in my chest, a primal rhythm of anticipation and resolve. My leg throbbed, a familiar companion now, reminding me of the price paid and the price yet to be extracted. Frankie was my eyes and ears, coordinating from miles away, feeding me real-time intel from his drones and compromised security feeds. 2 guards on the main building, John. Frankie's voice crackled softly through my earpiece. Standard patrol rotation. 1 every 15 minutes on the east side, the other stationary by the south entrance. Understood, I whispered back, my own voice barely a breath. I circled wide, using the dense tree line as cover, the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves masking my presence. I moved with the silent grace of a seasoned hunter, each step calculated, each shadow utilized. The first guard on the east patrol was an amateur. I waited until he rounded a corner, his back to me, engrossed in his phone. A swift, silent move. A hand over his mouth, a sharp twist, and he crumpled without a sound. Hidden in the bushes, disarmed and bound. He'd wake up with a nasty headache, but alive. I wasn't a killer unless absolutely necessary. My aim was justice, not vengeance through bloodshed. The second guard, by the south entrance, was more attentive. He stood smoking, scanning the perimeter, his rifle held loosely. I couldn't risk a direct confrontation without alerting the others inside. I needed a distraction. "Frankie, any way to trigger a localized power surge?" I whispered. "Working on it," he replied. "There's an old generator shed on the west side. Patching into its controls now. Give me 30 seconds. I found cover behind a pile of rusted mining equipment, watching the guard. 30 seconds felt like an eternity. Then a sudden blinding flash from the generator shed, followed by a loud crack and a sputter. The lights in the main building flickered, then died, plunging the camp into near-total darkness. The guard jumped, startled, his rifle coming up. "What the hell was that?" he shouted, looking towards the shed. He started to move towards it, his attention diverted. That was all I needed. I moved like a ghost, covering the distance in a few silent strides. He never saw me coming. A quick, precise strike to the temple, and he was out, bound and hidden. 2 down. Now, for Lillian. The main building was thick with the smell of stale coffee and fear. I moved through the darkened corridors, my tactical flashlight a narrow beam cutting through the gloom. I found Lillian in a small, windowless room at the back, chained to a cot. Her eyes were wide with terror when she saw me, her body trembling. She was thin, pale, but alive. "Lillian," I whispered, keeping my voice low. "I'm a friend. I'm here to get you out. Sarah sent me." Her eyes, raw with fear, flickered with a desperate hope. "Sarah? Is she?" "She's gone, Lillian," I said gently, cutting the chains with a specialized tool Frankie had provided. "But she died fighting for you. We're finishing her fight." As I freed her, I saw a folder clutched to her chest. "The evidence?" I asked. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "It didn't find it all. I hid it. They only found a decoy." My heart soared with a grim triumph. Sarah had trained her well. This girl was a survivor. Just as we turned to leave, a commotion erupted outside. Sirens in the distance, and the sound of heavy footsteps. "FBI, federal agents. Drop your weapons and surrender." Agent Stone, right on time. Frankie had timed the power surge and my infiltration perfectly with the FBI raid. "We need to go, Lillian," I urged. "Stick close. Don't make a sound." We slipped out the back entrance just as the FBI breached the front. Gunfire erupted, mostly warning shots, as Ethelred's remaining security detail engaged the agents. The camp was a chaotic mess of flashing lights and shouts. "Frankie, we're out. Heading towards the rendezvous point," I whispered into my earpiece. "Copy, John." Agent Stone just secured the main building. They found a treasure trove of evidence. "And they're looking for you, John. Or, rather, the mysterious informant." I guided Lillian through the dense undergrowth, bypassing the FBI agents who were now swarming the camp. She was weak but determined. We reached Frankie's prearranged pickup point, an old logging road a mile from the camp. A dark SUV waited, its engine idling silently. "Get in, Lillian," I urged, pushing her gently into the back seat. Frankie was behind the wheel, his face grim but relieved. "John, you're not getting in?" Lillian cried, fear returning to her eyes. "Not yet," I said, looking back at the chaos of the camp. "I have one more loose end to tie up." I had a separate vehicle waiting, a motorcycle I'd stashed. Emily and Mark. It was time for the final act. I arrived at Mark's opulent penthouse in Asheville, just as the first glimmer of dawn touched the eastern sky. The building, a symbol of his ill-gotten gains, felt almost alive with a tense, brittle energy. Frankie had confirmed that Emily was there, holed up with Mark, both in a state of utter panic after hearing about the Ethelred raids. I bypassed the security system with practiced ease, a ghost in the gleaming corridors. The penthouse door was unlocked, a testament to their fear and haste. I entered, the soft click of the door echoing in the cavernous, silent space. Mark and Emily were in the living room, surrounded by scattered papers, a half-empty bottle of expensive scotch, and a laptop displaying frantic news reports about Ethelred Corporation's downfall. Emily was crying, her face streaked with tears and mascara. Mark was pacing like a caged tiger, his expensive suit rumpled, his slick hair disheveled. He looked less like a shark and more like a rat caught in a trap. "It's over, Mark. It's all over," Emily sobbed. "The FBI is everywhere. They're raiding everything. What about us? What about our money?" Mark slammed his fist on a glass coffee table. "Calm down, Emily. I'm making calls. We'll find a way out of this. I always do. It's just a setback." "No," I said, my voice low and clear, cutting through their hysteria. "It's not a setback, Mark. It's the end." They both froze, turning slowly, their eyes, wide with disbelief and terror, fixed on me. Mark's jaw dropped, his face contorting into a mask of pure horror. Emily gasped, a choked sound, her eyes scanning my face, slowly recognizing the man she'd tried to murder. "Dad?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. But you're dead." I walked further into the room, stepping out of the shadows, my face grim. "A fact you were both quite keen to ensure, Emily. You and Mark, on the cliff. Remember?" Mark stumbled backward, knocking over a lamp. "Impossible. You were dead. We checked." "You didn't check carefully enough," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. "My wife, however, she knew. She told me to play dead. A final gift before you took her from me." My gaze, cold and hard, fixed on Emily. "My own daughter. My own flesh and blood. You push your mother off a cliff for money. For his money." Emily fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "No, Dad. It wasn't me. It was Mark. He convinced me. He said you wouldn't sell the land. He said we had no choice." Mark lunged, a desperate, pathetic attempt, grabbing a heavy glass trophy from the mantel. "You're a dead man. You hear me? I'll finish the job." I moved with the fluid grace of a man half his age, honed by years of combat. He was slow, clumsy, fueled by fear. I disarmed him with a flick of my wrist, the trophy clattering harmlessly to the floor. Then, with a practiced move, I twisted his arm behind his back, forcing him to his knees, his face pressed against the polished floor. He cried out in pain, a pathetic whimper. "You're not finishing anything, Mark," I said, my knee pressing firmly into his back. "Your reign of terror, your little empire of lies and poison, is over. And Lillian is safe." Emily looked up, her eyes glazed with tears, seeing Mark for the sniveling coward he truly was. She saw the full extent of her complicity, the depth of her fall. Her face, for the first time, held a flicker of genuine remorse, mixed with abject terror. "Lillian," she whispered. Just then, the outer door to the penthouse burst open. Federal agents, led by Agent Stone, swarmed in, weapons raised. Frankie had timed their arrival perfectly. Agent Stone took in the scene, Mark on the floor, me standing over him, Emily weeping. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, met mine. A moment of silent, profound understanding passed between us. He didn't know who I was, not truly, but he knew I was the one who had led him here. The ghost. "Mr. Thornton, you're under arrest," Stone announced, his voice authoritative, "for conspiracy to commit murder, environmental fraud, and a litany of other charges." Agents moved to cuff Mark. Stone then looked at Emily. "Mrs. Thornton, you're also under arrest for your involvement in the murder of John and Sarah Harrison, and as an accessory to the crimes of Ethelred Corporation." Emily didn't resist. She simply stared at me, her eyes pleading, desperate, utterly broken. The little girl I knew was gone, replaced by this shattered woman, facing the consequences of her choices. I felt a sharp pang of pain, a deep sorrow for what she had become. But there was no rescue for her from this. She had to walk this path herself. I held her gaze for a long moment. Then, with a subtle nod to Agent Stone, who understood the unspoken signal, I turned and melted back into the shadows of the penthouse, disappearing before the chaos fully erupted. The agents were focused on Mark and Emily, on securing the scene. They wouldn't even realize I was gone until it was too late. My work here was done. The serpent had been met, and justice, cold and unyielding, was finally served. But the cost was immeasurable. The aftermath was a whirlwind of headlines, arrests, and the slow, grinding machinery of justice. News outlets, initially focused on the tragic hiking accident, now erupted with revelations about Ethelred Corporation's vast network of environmental crimes, Mayor O'Connor's corruption, and the attempted murder of John and Sarah Harrison. The story became a national sensation, a seemingly idyllic mountain community rocked by a corporate conspiracy, with greed and betrayal at its dark heart. Mark Thornton, arrogant to the end, tried to negotiate, to plead bargain, to blame everyone but himself. But the evidence was overwhelming. Lillian's testimony, corroborated by Sarah's hidden documents and the hard data recovered by Frankie's team and Agent Stone, painted an incontrovertible picture of a ruthless operation. The illegal mining, the toxic waste dumping, the systematic destruction of pristine ecosystems, it was all laid bare. In his desperate attempt to silence Sarah and me, to acquire her critical land deed, was the final damning piece. He was facing a lifetime behind bars. Emily, my daughter, her trial was separate. She confessed. Eventually, her carefully constructed world shattered, the weight of her choices crushing her. She blamed Mark, cited his manipulation, her fear of him, her own financial vulnerability. There were glimmers of the old Emily in her tearful testimony, moments of genuine remorse. But they were inextricably mixed with self-pity and a desperate attempt to mitigate her own culpability. The jury, however, saw through it. She was sentenced to a substantial prison term. The judge, in his sentencing, spoke of the profound betrayal of family, the desecration of trust. I read the reports from a distance, from my new, anonymous haven. Frankie had set us up in a small, quiet town on the coast of Oregon. A place far removed from the mountains of North Carolina, a place where no one knew John Harrison or his previous life as Harrison or the landscape designer. Here, I was just a quiet widower, an old man looking for peace. Lillian was with me. She was still fragile, haunted by her ordeal, but she was alive, safe, and slowly, painstakingly healing. She clung to me, a surrogate father, a last link to the woman who had saved her life. We spent our days walking the rugged coastline, the roar of the Pacific a constant, soothing presence. She talked about Sarah often, about her kindness, her wisdom, her quiet strength. And through Lillian's stories, I came to know a different Sarah, a deeper Sarah than the one I thought I had known for 40 years. Sarah, my loving, gentle Sarah, had been a secret warrior. She had fought for justice, for the environment, for Lillian, with a courage I never fully appreciated. Her secrecy wasn't a betrayal, it was a shield. She had created a separate life to protect me, to protect our serene existence from the dangerous battles she chose to fight. She had leveraged her hidden fortune, not for personal gain, but for a cause she believed in. And in her final moments, she hadn't just saved my life, but she had entrusted me with her legacy, to protect Lillian and to complete her mission of exposing the truth. One crisp afternoon, I stood on a windswept bluff overlooking the ocean, a small, weathered wooden box in my hands. Inside was a small packet of Sarah's favorite wildflower seeds, the ones she always planted in our garden back home. Her ashes, in accordance with her wishes, had already been scattered in the mountains she loved. This was my personal ritual, my farewell. You kept so much from me, my love. I whispered, the wind carrying my words out to sea. And in your last breath, you gave me a truth more horrifying than anything I could have imagined. But you also gave me a mission. And for that, I forgive you. For all of it. For keeping me safe, for fighting your battles alone. I understand now. And I'm so proud of you. I opened the box, letting the seeds scatter into the wind, carrying the promise of new life, new growth, even from the ashes of betrayal and sorrow. My own arc was complete, yet unfinished. John Harrison was officially dead, lost in the mountains. And I, the man known as Harrison, the quiet, retired operative, had fully emerged from his long retirement. I was no longer just a husband, a father, a landscape designer. I was a guardian, a dispenser of a quiet, unyielding justice. I had sought to avenge my wife, and in doing so, I had uncovered a vast conspiracy, rescued an innocent life, and brought powerful criminals to justice. The pain of Emily's betrayal still lingered, a dull ache that might never fully disappear. She was my blood, and that bond, however fractured, could not be completely severed. But I had chosen justice. She had chosen greed. And sometimes, the hardest lessons are learned in the silence of a prison cell. Frankie had stayed in New Orleans, running his bar, his steady presence a lifeline in my new, solitary existence. We spoke often, in coded conversations, our bond forged in the fires of shared trauma and unwavering loyalty. He was family now, in a way that Emily no longer was. Lillian and I built a new life, slowly, carefully. She pursued her environmental studies, now with an even fiercer resolve. I taught her self-defense, survival skills, and the art of observation. She would carry Sarah's legacy, but she would also carry the strength forged in her own ordeal. I am a ghost, a whisper in the shadows, but I am not truly alone. I have Lillian, a living embodiment of Sarah's courage and conviction, and I have the quiet satisfaction of knowing that, sometimes, even the most unassuming people hide depths of power and resolve that can change the course of lives and expose the darkest corners of human greed. They thought they had silenced us. They thought they had won. But they only awakened a sleeping giant. And the mountains, those beautiful, treacherous mountains, held not just a grave, but a resurrection. A quiet man who finally understood the price of silence and the power of a single, desperate whisper.